Mm.
That. And who wants to chit-chat in the morning when you have McDonald's to eat anyway?
Enjoy our delicious 2 for $5 select breakfast sandwiches. Bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit, sausage McMuffin with egg, and egg McMuffin. Price and participation may vary. Single item at regular price.
Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. McDonald's. I'm loving it.
Did you know Cascade Platinum is so powerful you can load dirty dishes in the dishwasher without a pre-rinse?
More power, more clean. Cascade for your dishwashing machine.
That's right. Unlike other detergents, Cascade Platinum has 50% more cleaning power with enzymes that break down food particles. It even works in your dishwasher's quick wash cycle.
More power, more clean.
So skip the pre-rinse and switch to Cascade Platinum with 50%.
More power.
Welcome to a place where everyone deserves to be better protected, where technology has your back, where you can have better protection and keep more money in your pocket, where you can have protection for your car, your home, your phone, and even your digital identity. Welcome to a place where your entire life can be better protected. You're in good hands with Allstate.
Allstate and affiliates offer products and services subject to availability, terms, and conditions. There are everyday actions to help prevent the spread of respiratory diseases. Wash your hands. Avoid close contact with people who are sick. Avoid touching your eyes, nose, and mouth. Stay home when you are sick. Cover your cough or sneeze. Clean and disinfect frequently touched objects with household cleaning spray. For more information, visit cdc.gov/COVID-19. This message brought to you by the National Association of Broadcasters and this station.
Kiss 107.1 is WTLZ Saginaw, home of the Steve Harvey Morning Show, and simply the best R&B all day. Take us everywhere. Your smartphone, the JOB, and your Alexa smart device.
Well, good evening, Saginaw. You've tuned into another edition of Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen. I am your host, Kareem Bowen, and welcome to another conversation about our community. Today, we're going to really be talking about rebuilding the village, really mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, rebuilding the village after this pandemic. And we're going to talk about the things that are going to be necessary in order for us to move forward and continue to make Saginaw a great place for us to live. I am in the studio today. I'm in the studio with my producer, the Rob Father. Why don't you give a shout out to everybody, Rob?
How's it going? Not Straight Talk audience. I'm here.
Hey, Rob.
Man, too many hats, man.
Yeah. For those of you who are here in the city of Saginaw or the surrounding areas, actually, if you're anywhere in the state of Michigan, I'm sure you have seen, you have heard, you know about all of the weather and everything that's going on. It is crazy outside. So I want you guys to make sure that you guys are safe and that you're doing what is necessary for you to remain safe because the city is really getting hit once again by some crazy traumatic weather. And we just want to make sure that these things are not impeding people from being healthy and being safe and those other things. Well, I want to get right into the crux of our show for today. Let's start talking about what's on my mind. I want to hit these things really quick so that we can get into talking about really getting into the depths of our conversation on today in terms of making sure that how do we rebuild the village after this pandemic. All right. So really want to just say thank you for those of you who are out there. You guys were less impacted than my other show on the other station, but I just want to bring to light, and I think that we need to talk about these types of things. And what I'm talking about, Rob, is the fact that, just being able to be emotionally well. And I shared with you through the show that we were talking when we were on live. And I just shared with you that it was important to take some time to decompress. What I realized, for those of you that are listening, is I realized that over the past 18, 19 months, I have been going crazy. Some of you guys are gonna be like, we told you to slow down. But it really wasn't about slowing down. It was really about making sure that I was emotionally well, and not that I've, fallen off and gone, one flew over the cuckoo's nest. But the fact that I wasn't well, and I did not recognize that initially. I realized that there was a lot going on. And many times, if you're a person who works in any type of service industry, whether it be a nurse, a doctor, a pastor, whatever it was, and I kind of fill spaces in all of those places, and trying to make people feel connected and making sure that everyone is, how shall I say it, that everyone is taken care of. We spend a great deal of time making sure that everyone is taken care of. And one of the things that I recognized is that while I was taking care of everyone else, I really was not taking care of myself the way that I should have been. And so I want to make sure that we do this as a community, as a village. And Rob, you and I have talked about emotional and mental health, just kind of one-on-one sometime. And even we've had people come in and talk about this. What did you do to really stay healthy over the past 18, 19 months? And we'll get into this discussion.
Well, due to some traumatic situations in my life and trying to deal with work and trying to compartmentalize.
Compartmentalize.
Thank you.
I got you, my brother.
Right. I'm trying to do that. It wasn't easy. I did a lot of, I'm the kind of person that I push a lot of things down inside myself. And because like you, I try to be all things to all people. And then I had to learn in my early 50s, that I could not possibly do that. It was causing great stress. I did seek professional help at the VA. I'm not ashamed of that, because a lot of Black men need to come forth and admit that they have mental issues. And it's not a thing of why I'm a strong person and why people think we're strong. We have our own issues too, and we come forth as being a strong person, but they forget that as sensitive people and as humans, we have our issues too. So, I don't fake the funk, so to speak. So I told the doctor, I say, there's issues in my mind. I'm thinking dangerous thoughts, thoughts that are not healthy. I'm trying to think back to the things that are important to me, such as my son. He's my number one person in my life, at the moment, next to myself. And I say, I could not do to him what so many other people do to their kids. So, the doctor helped me through and checked on me, especially last year during COVID, when we had to do a lot of our conferences had to be done video wise.
Absolutely.
And he would check on me from time to time and give me advice, and I was very honest with him about everything on the board. So that helped me a great deal, just actually talking to someone, and then finding people who I can relate to about certain things too. I found a brother in Washington, D.C. who listens to the show. His name is Rick Irick, and he and I could talk about a lot of things at the same time. He's 64 years old, used to be in the Navy, and we shared a lot of our experiences, what have you. So whether he knows it or not, I'm sure he's listened to the show here. He helped me get through a lot of things.
What's his name again, Rob?
Rick Irick.
Rick Irick. We give you a shout out for listening all the way in Washington, D.C. Thank you for listening to Straight Talk.
Yeah, he used to work for the Congress there, and as I said, he's a veteran, and he was very frank. It's hard to find people like that. Or my mentor Dante Toussaint. Without him, I could not have been the host of the show that I do on Sundays. So people like that, I'm able to talk to about various things. And then there's Jimmy Green as well. Jimmy Green. I think a lot of people know Jimmy Green in the community. He's a down the home brother too as well. So shout out to Dante Toussaint and to Jimmy Green who helped me more than they know to get through a lot of things with my life. And
Jimmy's
60s.
a good guy. I like Jimmy. All right, but so I appreciate that, Rob. And I'll tell you what was the indicator for me. It was I didn't have any major issue or any feelings or self-talk or any of that kind of thing. But what happened was I was in the midst of doing something. I was working on a project, and I was concluding one project, and it was a great success, and I had a great time with it. And I was in the process of working on starting another project. Then I had something else that was taking place. And it just seemed like when that thing derailed because of just natural things, it was just natural things, product shortages, those kinds of things.
Right.
It hit me in a way that it normally would hit me. I found myself sitting on the floor by the side of my bed, ready to break down in tears, because I could not, it was out of my hands. It was out of my element. And I sat there, and then once I got stopped and I wiped my face, and I was like, what's wrong? And it was interesting because I left, I got up, and this is what happened. There was that happening. I had a couple people that were in the hospital. I was getting this up and down news about my grandmother out in Las Vegas. Hello, Mother Conway, Grandma, how you doing? Just going back and forth. And I didn't realize how these things were taking a toll on me day after day, little by little. just festering underneath the surface. I was dealing with them. People would not have recognized it. But I'll tell you what happened. I went and I was walking down the street and I was talking to someone else. And someone said, "Hey, are you the guy? You're the guy from the radio." I was like, "Yeah, straight talking. Yeah. I listened to you, man. You have some good topics. You really helped me through the situation." And I thought about it myself. Like, I'm helping people through situations. And honestly, I didn't realize it, but a brother was struggling himself.
Right.
And so there was a delay in me being able to complete what I was working on for about 4 days. And I was talking with another friend, and they told me about this really nice chateau that was up in Michigan. I was like, "Wait, a chateau in Michigan?" That's I'm like, "Really?"
What year? What
Yeah,
time?
yeah. They're like, it's number one in the country, in USA Today. And I got online, and they just so happened to have a space available. I reserved the space, and I got out of here, and I took some time.
Cool.
And I'll tell you, it was about 4 days of just peace, just sitting there unwinding. I did not realize, Rob, how wound up and how consumed my mind was with the 50 million things that I was doing. And this is what often happens with us. We get so consumed in what seemingly is our routine day, our everyday routine. We, taking care of the kids, taking care of the spouse, taking care of what your responsibilities are with job. If you're involved with the community, your civic responsibility, all of these things.
Which way?
Absolutely. And I realized that I was no good to anybody if I wasn't any good to myself. So I took that time away, and I'll tell you, I wanted to come back and talk a bit more about branding, because that's kind of where we left off on last week. And I want to thank you guys for the response that you guys have gave me on that one. But I found out that I needed to really begin to have a conversation about what do we do here in the village once we, as we begin to unpack, unload, climb underneath from underneath the debris of not one pandemic, but multiple pandemics. We understand, those of us who are part of the village, who work in the village, live in the village, our leaders in the village elders, that we not only suffered from a health crisis, which was COVID, but we also had a social justice crisis that took place. We had a tech crisis, if you would, because of the impact. We had to move to online learning and use technology, and our communities are not wired. And I say that as a play on word. Our communities are not wired to be, fully technical. And so our schools basically shut down. We lost communication with loved ones. Seniors were disconnected. And I remember going to the door and having to knock on some of the seniors that were a part of the church just to make sure that they were okay. Right. Just to make sure, give them a phone call. "Hey, is there anything that we can get?" Because we didn't want.
They don't have video conferencing. That's what
they didn't have. Exactly. It was never a problem. And, my mom, she became a Zoom connoisseur, aficionado, I should say.
Shout out to Geraldine.
Yeah, shout out, Mom. She became a Zoom aficionado because of the pandemic. So there were some bright things that came out of the pandemic, but what we saw was that our communities were not wired to be virtual and to really use technology in the manner that is necessary. And when I say our communities, I'm talking about our educational institutions as well, because in our communities, what basically happened was that schools shut down. And we did not see that anymore. And so I began to look at that. And then I thought about the fact that, there's this whole, we saw all of the disparities that existed in healthcare. We saw how COVID began to wreck our communities. And that's because of lack of being able to have foods that we eat. So now diabetes and high blood pressure are symptomatic in our communities because we lack the funding to really be able to produce well-cooked meals. When you're raising a family of 1 or 2 or 3, or it's just you, it costs more to eat healthy. And so,
the funding and the talent.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I saw all of these things that were going on. And then also on top of that, we were emerging from and going into at the same time a financial crisis. And so I just want to make sure that we are all good, that we are getting better. And so that will be the topic, the modus of our conversation for today. But before we get into that conversation, I want to say, in remembrance to 9/11, and I'm really trying to keep my head focused because a younger brother of mine said something. Actually, my son said something about 9/11, and I could not shake it after he said it. But this is the 20-year anniversary of 9/11. Is crazy. When we closed out on this war. I think the 20th anniversary of 9/11 also symbolizes 20 years that we were in war, in the nation's largest war, which was Afghanistan. And people don't remember. I mean, there's some kids that were born after the Gulf War invasion, and so Saddam Hussein, and all of these names, Osama bin Laden, are foreign to them, and it's crazy because we lived through this just as much as we look at and we talk about American history and civil rights.
Right.
This was a part of history that I was alive for, that we were alive for. And I remember, where were you at, Rob? That's the question. When JFK was killed, my mom always talks about, oh, I remember this happened and this is what people were doing. Where were you at? Do you remember where you
Yes,
were
I
during
do.
9/11?
I made a Facebook post about that. I was on a medical appointment at the local VA here, the Leader Lutz appointment. It was about 8:30ish, and we were watching TV and then watching everything unfold. And after the first or second plane crash, everybody was on their cell phones calling home and calling people in New York and Virginia about the Pentagon and whatnot. The Pennsylvania crash had not happened yet. So yeah, I remember distinctly what happened. It was like it was yesterday. And I also comment that this in our lifetime, Kareem, is our Pearl Harbor, because our parents and our grandparents, they had the chance to live through that and see memories of that, see that unfold. Now we're doing the same thing when America's been invaded by a foreign, country.
It's interesting because it takes me so far back. So much has happened in 20 years. It's crazy. When I think about what took place with 9/11, I remember exactly where I was. I was working at the time. I think I had just graduated from college a second time. And I was working with the Department of Corrections in Grandview Plaza in Lansing, Michigan. Go green, go white. And I was working on the 5th floor. Supervisor at that time, I think our administrator was Griffin Rivers. I call him Grandpa Griffin Rivers. Laura Dotson was my direct manager. And I remember we were all sitting there. We had a very tight-knit group of people that were working. And Griffin Rivers, the administrator, came down. He goes, "Man, you're not gonna believe this. Come see this, Kareem." And so he always thought it was his responsibility to keep me aware and keep me cultured. So I went to his office and I was standing at the door. And by this time, there's probably 5 or 6 people in there. And he's like, "Some crazy food and ran they plane into the World Trade Center." And it was crazy because just a month before, it was in August, June, July, 2 months before. This was the same time that I think that I was in New York for the draft. And we took this like little New York City tour, even though I've been in New York a million times. My entire family was there. And we were one of the double-decker tour buses. And when we stopped in front of the World Trade Center, because there's a break that's on that bus right there where people can get off and buy things. And I remember asking the tour guy, like, has anyone ever flown a plane into the World Trade Center? And he was like, actually, there was one that went into the Empire State Building, years before.
Right.
And so, we left.
A bus crashed too in the World Trade Center some years ago.
Yeah, at the bottom. There was a bombing.
Right,
yeah,
a bombing.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was kind of like, wow, it was so eerie because just a few months before, I think it was June, the end of June, during draft week, I was there and I asked that question. And it was the craziest thing when I saw that take place. And we were standing there and I saw the other tower go down. And then working in a government agency, the entire government went into lockdown. So they were like, "We're locking down the building. You can't leave. No one can come in." I was like, "Griff, I got to get out of here." I live about 76.2 miles away from here. My family is home. We didn't know what was going on. If we were at war, if they were going to become, I watched, Red October, Hunt for Red October, people coming in pairs. I didn't know what was going to take place. But I said, "Listen, I need permission to leave right now." So they allowed me to leave. And I remember getting on the highway, it was 69 driving east, and from Lansing to Flint, right before Flint, there was literally, I did not pass a single car, truck, any type of vehicle, motor vehicle on the highway. It was the most eerie feeling on the planet. I got home, like, "Where are you doing?" I'm like, "Look, we're at war. What's going on?" But it was one of those moments that really made you think and understand how quickly life can change. And so we salute those individuals, those firemen, those firefighters, the police officers, New York's finest, and all the families who were affected, impacted, those who lost their lives or lost someone that was a part of the 9/11. Our hearts and your prayers are continually with you. And I like to remember these moments, Rob, because what happened in 9/11 shows us the very best of who we can be as a nation. It shows us the importance of our institutions and the solidarity that we are able to forge when we are attacked from outside sources. But then I think about what took place just, 20 years later, January 6th, and how the thing that drove us together, which is, the greatness of our institutions, becomes the very thing that drives us apart. And so it's sad to see, but my prayers and heart goes out now. I'll tell you what I was going to say. I'm just going to throw it out there. And this takes nothing away from those who lost their lives, servicemen and women, everyday people walking to and from work. As a matter of fact, I had a friend that was supposed to go to work, but they called off work that day, so they weren't in the trade center. How amazing is that? I have a cousin who lives in New York, and they were supposed to be filming right around the bottom of the Trade Center. They were not filming. You've talked to Essie Pacer before when she was on the show, and so they called off filming for that day, so she wasn't in the vicinity. So there were so many close calls that took place for people that were there that should have been impacted, that were blessed. And it was only the God. I think I give God. Some people say, man, higher power. Some people say chance. But I thank God for that opportunity. But I'll tell you what happened. This young man said to me, he goes, it's crazy that they want us to remember 9/11, and they want us to commemorate this date and continually keep it in our hearts and mind because Americans died that day.
Right.
But they want us to forget about what happened during the entire course of slavery. And that was such a profound statement. I think it's important that we remember the best of us and we remember the worst of us. One of the things, and not Dr. Rowe, but one of my high school teachers, Mr. Rowe, used to say, what is history? Records of the past. Mm-hmm. What's the purpose of history? To learn from past mistakes.
So you don't repeat it.
Absolutely. So hopefully we'll learn from that. But you want to take tee us up on a commercial break real quick? Boss. And when we come back from this commercial break, we're going to get in, are you okay? I need to know, is the village okay? And what are we going to do as we emerge from these pandemics that we are suffering? How do we make sure that we rebuild, and not to steal words from Joe Biden, our president, but how do we build and build back better? We're talking about rebuilding the village. Right back after this commercial.
You're listening to Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen on KISS 107.1.
Fall is a great time to update with a fresh coat of paint from Menards. We've purchased truckloads of paint to pass the savings on to you. Get a gallon of Pittsburgh Grand Distinction interior flat paint for only $19.99 after a $10 rebate and 11% off. And finish your repainting project today. Good through September 18th. Savings are a mail-in rebate. Some exclusions apply. See store for details.
Save big money at Menards.
RocketGrabPlus.com. The days of paying full price are over. And at RocketGrabPlus.com, we are always here to give you the deals that you need. You can get tons of half-off deals going on right now from Fat Matt's Barbecue, Joyce's Purple Palette, Kitchen Kings, Third Gen Tire and Service Center, Woody's Hot Dogs, King's Fish and More, and the Hamptons Boutique Tanning and Salon. Half off? Yeah, it's true. And it's all at RocketGrabPlus.com.
RocketGrabPlus.com. I'm Serena Williams. You watch me live on TV. So why am I in a British drama you watch on demand?
Fancy a dance, milady?
Sure. It's because DirecTV Stream brings the best of live TV and on demand together.
Oh, you're quite the dancer.
Mr. Jeffries, you're making me blush.
Oh.
Introducing DirecTV Stream, the best of live TV and on demand with no annual contract. Get your TV together at DirecTV.com.
Requires high-speed internet and compatible device. Content varies by package and location. Restrictions apply.
Welcome to a place where everyone deserves to be better protected, where technology has your back, where you can have better protection and keep more money in your pocket, where you can have protection for your car, your home, your phone, and even your digital identity. Welcome to a place where your entire life can be better protected. You're in good hands with Allstate.
Allstate and affiliates offer products and services subject to availability, terms, and conditions.
It's Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen on KISS 107.1.
All right, we're back, and I just wanted to make sure. So I want to thank Vicky Hill. She called in and let us know that she lost a cousin that was on the 100th floor. Is that correct, Rob, of the World Trade Center?
Right.
And we also want to make sure that we also pay tribute to all of the individuals that were on flight. United, was it 91?
92, 97, I forget the now.
I don't remember the numbers, but the United flights, the flights that were flying, the world, not the World Trade Center, but the Pentagon, and that were targeted to other places around DC and Pennsylvania. So we want to make sure that we're also paying tribute to them as well. Now, since we got that out, this is the last thing that's on my mind. And I'm about to have a moment right now, Rob.
Oh, boy.
Listen, you're right. Oh, boy. I was sitting here looking at my live stream. I'm like, wow, some of our usual suspects are not here. Let me tell y'all what happened to me, okay? Because I am the voice of the community, I'm going to say what needs to be said for our community. All right, there is another show that I do, United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America. And on this past week,
which airs on Sunday at 7 o'clock after this show on our sister station at WSGW AM 790 and 100.5 FM.
So I need you all, I want you guys to go listen to this conversation. And this is why, because I am in Facebook jail. They will not allow me to go live, Rob. When I'm sitting here looking at the stream.
That's
and I'm like
going to get that set up.
Yeah, there are
blocked.
None of the individuals. I'm sitting here like going, my YouTube channel's out there. So go to my YouTube channel. It's off. It's I Grow Daily. You get the same information. But I'm going to have to post this one because they won't allow me to go live on Facebook. And the reason they won't let me go to live is because over the past month, we started a conversation on the book, White Fragility.
Right.
All right. And so the book is a white, it's written by a white woman, and she's talking about the privilege and the experience and the systemic racism and supremacy that exists in all of our institutions, therefore exists in our nation. And so I was banned and put in Facebook jail for 30 days. Y'all listen to me because I want y'all to go listen to this conversation.
I'm shocked.
And Rob, you were a part of this conversation.
Right.
There was nothing that I said that was inflammatory. As a matter of fact, what I said was really sharing the information.
Straight from the book, Robin DiAngelo's book.
Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility, written by a white woman in America, talking about the institutions, the corporations, society, just every institution. And because that was a live that was on my page, I have been banned. But I see that the station is still here.
I would have thought that would have been banned on SGW because, I question sometimes, well, is anything racist? No, we're not doing anything racist. I'm checking. I'm the producer of the show. I'm checking all that. And I'm surprised when I tried to set up the StreamYard today.
It wouldn't let you do it.
It wouldn't let me do it.
I forgot to share that. So those of you that are listening, I want you to go and listen and on to the show that airs at WSGW. If you're in your car, if you're listening via the radio, you go to WSGW.com, I believe, right, and it'll play on you there and listen there. Or if you're listening on the radio, it is 100.5 and
790 AM.
790 AM.
It's not on one, it's on the other because we have a game.
I need you all to listen to this conversation because I was banned as putting information out there that was hate, when the reality of the situation, and we're challenging people to really think about the things that they're doing.
Examine what they're doing.
If conversations of race make you uncomfortable, then lean in and ask yourself, why do I feel so uncomfortable dealing and having conversations about race? I just wanted to share that to you. My people, listen, you know what? As soon as they let me out, I'm quiet right now, but you know what? When they let me out, I'll be talking again.
Let's go.
And we're coming right back. So I just wanted to let you guys. So if you're listening, looking for me on social media live, you're not going to get me live for the next 26 days or whatever it is.
We'll continue on this Wednesday when we do our recording.
Absolutely. We'll continue that conversation. But I thought it was worth noting. All right, so let's get to the conversation. Thank you, Rob. You jarred my memory when you started talking to me. All right, I want to get back to rebuilding the village post this pandemic spirit, this post-COVID, the social justice crisis, health crises, the financial crises. And I want to say that we have to begin, and I hear people saying, I'm ready to get back to normal. I don't think that there is any getting back to normal because we have been awakened as a people in so many ways. We have been awakened to a system of justice that no longer can stand the way that it is. So we have been hit with a number of things that have kind of changed the conversation temporarily, but there is still a definitive conversation that must take place on the status and the formation of our, what do we call it? Our policing system. What is going on with police in our community. And I'm not a person who believes in let's banish the police or dismantle the police completely, but I think that we have to begin to envision what that looks like. So there's a whole conversation, and I don't want us to go back to normal. I want us to begin to approach this instead of doing everything from a top-down approach, as we often do. Let's think of this from a bottom-up approach. All right. Because what we learn is that really resiliency is inherently shaped by a community's unique needs. The best way to ensure that we ourselves can take care of ourselves is to embrace solutions that are developed from the community level. For too long, civil society institutions, including the United Way, have guided us by logic models drafted at centralized locations instead of ideas and priorities that emanate from people on the ground. What I'm saying is that for so long, there have been other institutions and institutions that do not understand our plight as a community of color that have been put in position to solve our issues. We don't need the man to come and solve our issues. What we need is for our village elders to come together. Let's have a conversation. We want anyone that's at the table that understands. And listen, George Bush said it best. He said, if there's ever a time in history when white America needs to sit and listen to the issues that are at hand, this is the time. And so he says he's listening, he's sitting, and he's learning. What do our communities say that we need? So let's take a bottom-up approach on this instead of a top-down approach. And then also let's avoid this whole concept of back to normal thinking. Let me give you a word: transformative. Let's think of ways that are transformative in terms of how we operate in our community. COVID exposed failing systems in all the way in every area of our communities. It has been like a slow-moving, powerful hurricane, wreaking damage everywhere instead of isolating its effect to one location. If Hurricane Katrina ripped the roof off the shortcomings of New Orleans in the U.S., then the coronavirus is tearing apart the very foundation of the society's entire house. All right. We have to begin to realize that there is I don't want to go back to normal, because normal wasn't good enough for my community. Normative was not good enough for me. So I want us to begin to think transformatively on what we need to do in order for our communities to be rebuilt. And I love Build Back Better. That's what I really believe. We often ask the question or use the African adage, Rob, that it takes a village to raise a child. And why do we say that? Why do we use that adage, Rob?
It's true, because if we stick together, we all look out for one another. We are a village and a community. We just take advantage of us all living together in one group. We're better together to do things, look out for one another, than we are apart. And I'm, it's one thing that I'm proud to be Black for, because I grew up in that type of environment. Everybody looking out for one another. If you do that, I'm gonna tell your mother on it.
Yeah,
and that helped take care of the discipline factor of it, as well as teach us what have you.
So, and what you're saying is absolutely right. Two heads are better than one. We have eyes that are able to see from every corner of the community. And if we are going to begin to build our community back better, there are three things that we've got to begin to consider: response, recovery, and rebuilding. These are three post-catastrophic things, catastrophe things that we have to look through. Three stages that we've got to begin to go through. Now, we've already begun to see the response. It was how society began to react to the immediate aftermath. Our people were getting shelter. We saw the government taking care of unemployment building benefits and giving these additional benefits for things that were out there. So we saw food pantries and different agencies giving cards out for food, not just our government aid, but a lot of different agencies providing additional food assistance. Yeah, Rob.
These are silver linings we have. We got to appreciate the people who are in the service industry, our waiters,
absolutely,
our nurses, whatnot.
Absolutely.
And said they need to be paid more, because a lot of time we just looked at them and said, okay, you're just doing a job. But once all that came down and people couldn't go to restaurants, whatnot,
yeah. So there was a lot that was uncovered. So we need to make sure that all of these things, our emergency systems, our first responders, our police, we've seen all of these things. That was the initial response. So we've seen that in action. We're seeing that in action. We're seeing actually an ending to the initial response that took place. Now we move and we are operating into the next two phases, which are recovery and rebuilding. And recovering consists of the establishment of relief funds. We've seen that ARPA, American Rescue Plan, America Rescue Act. And so we see these relief funds that are coordinated networks of care. It includes public policy actions. What public policy has changed? Now, that's one thing that's very concerning for me. We see public policy as it relates to what's happening with healthcare. We have conversations, but what has been the meaningful change? We've seen some healthcare extended to people who normally would not have it. We see now a resurgence. COVID really began to show us why Obamacare was so important for many people, because we had people that were hit with the system, communities already strapped. Even with Obamacare, many people could not afford it because of the premiums and other things. But what we did see is that those individuals who were able to afford healthcare during Obamacare, they were given such a supreme benefit because now they had healthcare at the crux of a major pandemic, which President Obama told us would take place, and urged that next administration to do what was necessary in order to prepare.
Right.
What were you going to say, Rob?
No, I'm agreeing.
Okay. So he's in agreement. So we see that type of recovery action taking place. We see volunteers mobilizing. We see nurses and hospitals, and I was a village vaccination liaison trying to get this vaccination. Once it was instrumented and once it came into reality and it was tested, and doctors and the CDC and FDA and everybody else that had a letter acronym approved and said that this will work and this has a great level of efficacy, we saw volunteers in the community come forward and begin to, get our most vulnerable 65 and older vaccinated. Then they went 16 and older, and now I think we're at 12 and older. Right. And we began to jump into gear and to really try to see what we could do to mobilize. That's what we call in terms of recovery. And it was amazing to see how people were in recovery mode. I wish all of our communities were in recovery mode, but when you haven't been impacted on the first go, the way that we've been impacted, I have seen loved ones and friends in one family, the uncle, the brother, the nephew, and two of the other kids, all decimated, gone because of this virus. Other people were not experiencing COVID that way. And so their response and their recovery was not exactly the same. And so when we begin to look at this, it's important for us to realize that we've got to continue. I saw pastors lobbying, and I want to thank the Saginaw African American Pastors, SAAP, for really being strong. And people don't realize it, but when you saw those clinics going up in certain areas on Cathay Street and out on Outer Drive and on 6th Avenue, it wasn't because that was the plan that was set in place, but those pastors got together and they said, listen, we're tired of waiting for the CDC to tell the governor, to tell Saginaw County, to tell the Department of Health. Chris Harrington, she has been a great advocate in our community, to tell, our medical officer, Miss Dr. Delisha Pruitt, to tell us that we can come get a vaccination. Why don't we begin to make a ground up approach? We want these vaccinations in our community.
Making the village work. And so I want to celebrate those pastors. We beat pastors up so often, but there are thousands of you who have vaccinations and have preventative measures of healthcare in your systems because these pastors actually did what was right and they went to bat for their communities, and we got vaccinations in our communities, vaccination sites, which should have happened long before, but hey, that's neither here nor there. So now we have to begin to talk about this concept of rebuilding the village, all right? And I hope you guys are really paying attention to this. And if you're watching this and it's replay, don't turn the channel now. Don't click off. I need you to lean in. I need you to like, tag, and share this conversation because it's important. And don't think it's a repeat because you started this very show where we're building the village.
Absolutely. That was a theme that we were stuck in. And this is a specific conversation that we must have because, Rob, I realized that I was operating and I was not well. I realized that I was functioning and I was doing everything that I normally did, but I was not emotionally and physically well. And so I want to make sure that our community is well. And so that means that we have to lean in to one another. And when we talk about rebuilding, rebuilding is often the step that gets overlooked by political and economic leaders whose interests are served by the structures of the existing systems. Are you hearing me? The systems that were back to normal, that were in existence, that is where most of our political and our economic leaders are focused on, getting back to the old systems. But I want you all to understand that the old systems were never your systems.
Right.
The old systems were never created with you in mind. Rob, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say that's why the whole Build Back Better complies to everybody.
Absolutely.
I don't want to go back to normal. I want to be a better person. And with your own personal situation there, you want to build back better, because you love your life. You want to live another, 20, 30 years or more.
Absolutely. So we have to make sure that if we want to avoid or at least minimize these future calamities, our community must embrace these core concepts as we rethink. Say that with me, rethink. As we rethink our society and we rebuild. It's important for us to begin to get back to the place that we were able to dream and conceptualize something great for our community. It's interesting because we talk about Black Wall Street. We talk about the Harlem Renaissance. We talk about all of the secret code societies. We talk about all of these great things that were in the past.
Yep.
But can we re-envision or reimagine us doing what they did on steroids, on another level? And so I want to challenge our community that as we begin this process of continual recovery and rebuilding, let's reimagine what the village looks like. And that means who stands at the gates. That means who takes leadership roles. That means how our community consumes and uses information. That means how we use our dollars. Do our dollars continually turn over in our community? We've got to begin to reimagine these systems because the systems that were in existence before were not to our benefit. So we've got to begin to think about that. All right. So as we strengthen the community, we've got to begin to think about equity and resiliency. This means ensuring that everyone has a requisite levels of health and economic security to avoid dependency, control their fate, and reemerge stronger. What did I just say right there? As we talk about reemerging, we want to make sure that we have two things that everyone, because we are resilient people already. We have been through, I feel like our whole lives, our whole existence as a people has been one Maya Angelou's poem. You can beat us with your tattered, torn lies and still like dust we rise. That was written for people who are resilient. And we are a resilient people. But we also we have to make sure that we have health and economic security, that we have systems in play, that we don't become dependent upon the system. Thank you, FDR, for thinking of us and thinking for communities as they needed help. But your welfare has become a place that we don't fare well in. And it has become a system of dependency. And I thank God, because I grew up and my mom was a single parent mom. So there was a period of time that we needed the welfare or the health system, the welfare system. And she used it for what she needed it for. And then she got off. But she wasn't being paid to have more children out of wedlock and regain. It is a system of poverty and depravity that we are continuing, that is continually recycling itself in our community. So as we begin to think about rebuilding the village, we've got to begin to take a top-down mental approach on how this happens to make sure that we avoid economic and health security that is dependent upon someone else's control. All right. So when we look at this, who is impacted and needs to think about this process of rebuilding? People who were injured during these crises that we've experienced, people whose family members were injured or killed. All of us know someone that died of COVID. All of us know someone right now. I have two very dear friends, and shout out Olga Jones and my brother Chucky Lawrence. We planned that march together down with Beverages for Bros, 300 Black men strong during the height of the pandemic, during the height of social cry for justice. And we planned that march. And this brother, because, I tell you, if you listen to me, I'm telling you, I'm getting the vaccination because I understand what's going on here. And he was hesitant about that. And he and my sister Alga both were hit with COVID, very strong, on a respirator, in the hospital, touch and go at many moments. And both of them are yet overcoming the after effects of COVID, trying to really get back to the point that they can breathe. And they're both on oxygen. So this is something that we've got to really begin to understand. People who were injured, people whose family members were injured or killed during COVID. I had a cousin that told you just after the insurrection, I lost him a few days before that, or just before the insurrection. People whose homes were damaged and totally destroyed. What I often forget about is that we had a whole flood in the midst of this whole thing. If you remember, the dams crushed up at Edenville, and so we lost two lakes that were a part of our greater community, but we also suffered loss. Businesses suffered loss. We had villages and communities and neighborhoods and stores that were hit by this once in a lifetime type of flood that ravished our community. Basements flooded, losing artifacts and things that were very important in our community. People with undamaged homes in those damaged areas. Your home was spared, but it's in an area where other homes are damaged. I'm just thinking about even the storm that just came through. Those things are very traumatic, and they really affect the rebuilding process that we're dealing with. People living near damaged areas such as flood zones. If you're living in an apartment and you didn't have renter's insurance, all of these things we need to take into consideration when we talk about building back. Business owners who lost property, who lost rents, who lost, because there's a moratorium on rent. You lost customers, you were shut down. The food industry was impacted, the hotel industry. So everything's going to be costing more because people are going to make up what they missed. Trust me. Hear me what I'm saying. So civic and other organizations that may have been affected as well, that may be called upon and were called upon to devote these resources to the disaster recovery. So I'm going to take a pause. I'm going to say, hey, we got to make sure. I saw that on the city of Saginaw, they had a website up. Rob, I was so impressed. Kudos to the city of Saginaw. I applaud you. Better late than never, but I saw that you did a community sweep. You put it out there. I saw hundreds of people share your post. They had an online, what do you call it? Feedback system or survey, asking the community, what should we do with these American Rescue Plan funds?
The $52 million.
Yes, the $52 million. I want to say to our city manager, when you get it right and when you finally do the right thing, I'm going to celebrate you at all times. And so I want to say kudos on the job well done. I went through the survey. I saw the survey. I was impressed with the professionalism, the questions that were asked. Great job. Hopefully our citizens in our community didn't just complain, but they took action because it was out there. I saw it on a couple different fronts. I shared it on a couple of my pages because it was important. I can't share stuff the way I want to now because I'm blocked on social media. That's a whole nother story. Rob, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, well, actually, did you ever talk to Brenda Moore, our mayor?
I did. And so I had a whole conversation with Brenda. And Mayor Moore is on top of the situation. So I need to thank you for asking me that, Rob, because I said I was going to do that. So she has been in constant conversation with our city manager about these funds. She said, listen, y'all need to just y'all know how you money. Y'all need to just take a break, back up. We got this. We're they're making plans, and she knows how to make money work. She's the president of the Michigan Municipal League over all of the so she is.
We need to get her on the show here.
Yeah, we need to get her. You're absolutely right, because she says, listen, they're making the plans, they're doing what's necessary, they're preparing, and so I'm going to trust our leadership in this moment. And so she says that we've been given some miscommunication in terms of information. I will take a stand back and wait to hear the correct information being reported. We'll get her in and her and the city manager together, right, and then they can kind of navigate the ship so that we know exactly where we are with those funds. Thanks for bringing that up as well, Rob. All right, so if we're going to do these things, if we're going to build our communities back, somebody said, what happens, it takes a village to raise a child. And I always ask the question, what happens when that village is on fire? It's time for us to repair the walls. We have breaches in our systems. We see the breach in healthcare. We see the breach in technology. We see the breach in education. We see the breach in our financial system. We see the breach in our social justice systems. There are breaches everywhere. So it's time for us to rebuild the walls. And how are we going to do that? The first thing that we need to do, and I'm hoping that we do this not only as a singularly as a community, which we do need to have happen, but we also need to think about this in the pockets where we have influence. I am a big proponent of people making changes in the places where you have impact. If you're not involved with certain areas and that's not where you have impact, don't worry about that.
Right.
But wherever you have influence, if you work with a couple other small entrepreneurs who are renting homes and flipping homes and doing that, because there's a lot of young men who are doing great by doing that type of thing in our community. Let's make influence. Let's make an impact in that area. The first thing that we need to do is to get refocused. Take stock of our immediate circumstances. And I think that that's what they have been doing with the ARPA, taking a lot of insight on where are we at? What do we need? What are the shortcomings that we have in our community? Are you, your family, and neighbors okay? And I got to ask you that question. Your family, your village, Are you okay? That becomes the number one question. And we can't really get beyond that if we're not okay, Rob. Rob, are you okay?
Yes, but how do you know?
I mean,
I'm saying if you ask that question there, if you ask, are you okay? Then you have to ask yourself, how do I know for sure?
Absolutely.
You got to go there and visit there. You have to go call them and find out what's going on, and not just say, I'm doing okay. Find out, how are you really doing?
And that was going to be my next point. So we're asking, are you okay? But let's start with the individual. So you need to assess, are you okay? And honestly, this is so important. And I'll tell you, my personal experience, let me know how important that it is, because I was not okay. I was able to smile. I thought I was okay. I was laughing and those things. But it was one situation that took a different turn, and my mental psyche responded differently to something that really wasn't a big thing, but it was something that caused me to know something is not quite
like
right here. Like why am I sitting at the end of the bed and a grown man crying about a situation that
no shame in that.
Yeah, you know what I'm being real, because I want someone to understand this. So I wasn't I was responding differently because I wasn't feeling myself. Right. And when I recognized that, and the only way I recognize that is that something happened that made me to take, I'm always doing introspection on myself, but I overlooked a lot. And so I want those who are listening, if you're listening to this or you're hearing this on social media, I need you to ask yourself, are you okay? Are you responding differently to things that normally you would be able to handle, like a whip, or are they taking you to a place that you're not used to being? What are you feeling? Be aware of what you're feeling, because we don't always do that. We often push forward and we're told to persevere and to go through. But I need you to stop and do a personal assessment of yourself. Are you sleeping well? And what I realized, Rob, is that I could check no on a lot of these things. I wasn't sleeping well. And I just assumed, because my mind was so anxious, because I wanted to make sure I had all these things to get done. But I wasn't sleeping well because I wasn't emotionally well.
Stress until you can eat well. You can't even go to the bathroom well in some cases. If you're constipated for some reason, it could be stress. Well, to a whole lot of issues. I'm just saying.
No, you're right. And so it's called psychosomatic.
Right.
Our bodies have, and we can have what is called a psychosomatic response, that our psyche, our mind, our thought, suke, has an effect on our soma, our bodies. And so we want to make sure that, like, are you experiencing moments where all of a sudden you have anxiety and your heartbeat, your heart is beating faster, and you think, oh, it's no big deal. It may not be a heart issue. It may be a head issue. And so I want to make sure that we are emotionally healed. So I want to start off with asking that question. And I also want to make sure, we're going to give you resources. I need to post some on here, because if you aren't feeling well and there is something wrong, make sure you contact me so that we can get those resources to you so that you can get the help that you need. Where have people in your community gone? And I think about this, Rob, during the height of this pandemic, I've had so many people that have left the communities. They're no longer living here. They moved to Texas. They moved to Atlanta. They moved to other places. So not only is there this thing that we've been dealing with for the past 18, 19 months, and now in threat of the Delta variant that's coming in that is more contagious, people are I was suffering from what we would call mitigation fatigue, and just caring too much, and having to tired of doing all the things that are necessary. My hands were becoming so dry from using sanitizer, all of these things. That's why people are throwing off the mask. Like, look, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. But you don't mean that until you get into the hospital. Then you'll realize that it is worth protecting your health. Not for yourself, but for those who love you, because this is a suffering disease. This is something that when you get, you suffer from. I had a young man, he's 18 years old, that was like saying, like, I didn't have any major, he says, but I could not breathe. And it was like something that was sitting on my chest. It was kind of scary for a second. And this is a young guy. So let's make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. Compassion fatigue is another thing. You get tired of caring. I preached so many funerals of people that I knew and did not know during COVID, that it was absolutely crazy. A great friend of mine, I didn't even have time, now that I think about it, I didn't even have time to really mourn her funeral, because when I came back a week and a half later, I had to do someone else's funeral. And these are people that I've prayed for forever. Deidre Moore, my heart is out for you and your family. She was a part of our ministry, and she had some issues that took her in Ann Arbor. She never got back after that took place. So there's a lot going on. Are you okay? We've got to get refocused. That's number one. Let's make sure we get refocused. The second thing, Rob, is what you were talking about. Get in touch. During these situations, people were moving about. Some people were moving to take care of older family members. Some family members were completely isolated by themselves. One of our church mothers, May Pierce, during the entire pandemic, I was just checking on her, and she made it through the pandemic but not without suffering. I think a lot of the things that she began to have physically wrong with her were because of not getting out of the house, not getting the exercise, not, preparing that come to Sunday school, come to Sunday church. Those things that were our routines, our norms that we were so used to. And we don't realize, Rob, people fail to realize how important having norms and having those things that get you out to be with other people play on your emotional and your physical health. And so she passed away just a couple weeks ago. I had to eulogize her just on this past Saturday. I eulogized another young man who's 10 years younger, 38 years old, who passed away. And so there is so much going on. We have to make sure that we are mentally and emotionally well. Then after we get refocused, we've got to get in touch. Make some phone calls to people that you haven't touched, because what happened during the pandemic, and I don't know if this is how you guys have fared during this period of time, but what I recognize is that during this pandemic, my circle of connection became so much smaller. Because during the pandemic, you were only really, you were locked down for 3 months, really. And when you went outside, it was almost like going out on Z Day or Z Nation because there was no traffic at certain times. It was ridiculous on how separated we became. This pandemic separated us like we never have been before. And it was the cries for social justice that brought us back together in terms of community. And so now I've recognized that the connections, the eating, the dinner at Big Mama's house, the holidays, now we're still dealing with the remnants of this thing. And so it's kept us apart from the people that we normally connect with. So it's time for us to really begin to reconnect. We've got to get in touch. All right. Now, the next thing we're going to do is get together. So we're making sure that we are okay. We're getting refocused. We're getting in touch. And now it's time for us to get together. And I don't want you guys to delay anymore. I'm not saying have 1 million people over, but those individuals, we are still being smart because we are still in a pandemic that is resurging in a possible fourth wave. I know you're tired of hearing about it, but I have to let you know, Village, we got to sound the alarm because this Delta variant, now they're also talking about, we then went from Lambda to Mu. It's a whole fraternity of letters that's going on with this pandemic, but it's resurging. And we are now, especially with children, this is the most number of children that have been affected during the entire course of this pandemic. Yeah. And now they're returning to school. And so we're seeing these things, and these people are now going to be inside because it's getting cooler. So we're not out the woods with this, but it's time for us to get back together. And it was amazing. Some people have called like, hey, are you guys back in church? I'm like, we've been back since January. But they're like, we can't take the separation anymore. We need to be back in touch and in communication, and to feel the love and the presence. And we're being smart about how we're doing that. Still registering for services if you can. We also want you to make sure that a lot of our churches vaccinated. I was caught like we're all getting vaccinated up in here. Everybody's getting vaccinated. So that was one of the mandates that we had. And since I was the leader for that drive in our community, it became something that the church took on as an issue. So we have a large body of our population, probably a good 85% of our congregation is fully vaccinated. So now there's this whole concept of, Rob, do we take the fourth shot? There's a lot for us.
The booster shot.
The third shot, excuse me, right. The third shot, the booster shot.
Right.
And so I have people that are saying, we're not getting any more shots. We're not taking another shot, Rob.
I'm concerned about those who don't have shots at all, in our own community, anti-vaxxers. And I'm concerned about that because they're making things dangerous for you and I.
Absolutely. And can we talk about how they make that dangerous, Rob, just really quick for a second?
Sure.
Because I'm talking about getting together. Now that you get refocused, you get in touch, it's time to get together. And we want to get back together. But man, I got some younger cousins who don't believe in mask wearing. I went to a couple of family functions and I get anxiety being around some of my family members because there's no mask, and you know that there's no caution. And it ain't just because we're family, but you see them in other places. They're not wearing masks.
They're too cool to wear masks.
They're too cool. It's not going to be that bad. I don't know what this is, but they are part of that anti-vaxxer community.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you don't know what's in that vaccination. And so I say that because the longer this virus is in a body, the virus needs a host.
That's right.
When it enters into a host, what happens is that host, it then takes a copy or a picture of their DNA, their cell DNA, and it tries to figure out a way to get around and get into their cell. That's how it affects them. So if it's in the community and it remains in the community, it remains a problem. So if we have individuals who are fully vaccinated, who are around people who are carrying the virus because they didn't want to do the responsible thing and get vaccinated, they now introduce that virus back to a person who is fully vaccinated. It's called a breakthrough infection. And what happens is once that individual gets that infection who is fully vaccinated, it then looks at that cell. It looks at the antibodies and the protective mechanisms that individual has. They won't get fully that sick, but what happens is now it begins to unlock the code of the vaccination that keeps it out of the body. This is how we continue to increase and have Lambda, Delta, Vi, whatever, Tau, Kappa, whatever. All of these letters is because we can't get our community vaccinated enough so that we can reach herd immunity where enough of the community is vaccinated that we have enough antibodies that are kicking the virus out. We've got to get together. It's time because emotionally and mentally, we need the feeling of touch. They say that when a person experiences touch, that it is necessary for them in terms of the human emotion and their mental psyche. So it's very important. We're going to continue this conversation because I want to make sure that we get what is necessary for us to do what is important in our community. So I want to go through those top 3 things that we did, and I'm going to bring the other 3 on next week. Get refocused. Let's get in touch. And number 3, let's get together. I want to thank you guys for your time and attention on today. I want you guys to hold up your fists in solidarity. Free Kareem from Facebook prison. I'm coming back. I might be quiet from now, but when they set me free, I'll be talking again. Thank you guys for your time and on today. Take care of yourselves and each other. God bless you all. Grace and peace.
You've been listening to Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen.